Theo was just trying to fix a leaking valve near Section 14 of Outpost Raka 7 when he opened the wrong door and saw something no human was ever meant to see: a tall alien warrior, standing half undressed, her silver armor sliding from her shoulders, her skin glowing with shifting markings that pulsed like living circuits. Before he could look away, she turned her head. Their eyes locked, and in that instant, everything changed. Her knees buckled, her body collapsed, and the entire station went into alert mode, sealing the hallway and locking Theo inside the room with her. The eye blared, an unfamiliar code flagged. Red protocol initiated, and within seconds the lights shifted to deep crimson as Carell, one of the most feared alien mercenaries in the sector, opened her eyes and whispered a single word that no translator could decode. Theo felt it sink into his bones, like it had always been waiting for him to hear it, and when backup arrived, she refused to leave his side, only repeating in her deep voice, "He has seen me now, he is mine, and no one must interfere." Theo had worked on Outpost Raka 7 for nearly 2 years, a quiet technician assigned to fix leaking pipes, calibrate life support vents, and stay out of trouble with the alien contractors who ran the security wing. He kept his head down, avoided eye contact, and spent most of his free time in the maintenance crawl spaces, tuning broken wiring systems that no one else bothered to touch. But one shift changed everything. A pressure alert came from the restricted warrior barracks, a place no humans were allowed without command approval, yet the leak warning was active, and the AI assigned him directly without hesitation. He grabbed his toolkit and entered through the side hatch, unaware of the private status of the chamber. As soon as the door slid open, he froze. The air was thick with incense and heat, and at the center of the room stood a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. Carell, the feared alien warrior from the Rin faction, known for her strength, her unmatched battle record, and her complete disdain for humans, was in the middle of removing her battle gear, her upper armor set aside, her skin marked with glowing lines that pulsed in rhythm with the air itself. She turned. Slowly their eyes met, and time seemed to fracture. Her lips parted, her pupils narrowed, and she whispered something in a language the translator chip refused to process. Then, without warning, her body went limp, and she collapsed. Theo rushed to her side, adrenaline overtaking logic, but before he could touch her, the walls lit crimson, and a lockdown sequence initiated. The door slammed shut, the lights dimmed to red, and the AI voice echoed in a tone he had never heard before. Binding sequence triggered, unknown human designation matched, initiating quarantine protocol 37. The floor panels beneath him glowed, and a transparent barrier rose from the ground ceiling. Both him and the unconscious alien inside a sterile chamber that wasn't on any map he had seen before. Minutes passed, or maybe hours, he couldn't tell, until Carell stirred. Her eyes fluttered open and locked onto his, her face void of fury, void of confusion, instead filled with certainty. She reached out, one hand pressed it to his chest, and said the words again. This time slower, more deliberate. "You are chosen now, and everything must change." Theo backed away, stunned, unsure what she meant, until the AI interrupted again. Cross-species imprint confirmed. Subject marked as mate candidate pending completion of bonding cycle. He stared at the console as words scrolled faster than he could read. Strange biological data intermixing with his own medical logs in the system, flashing unknown genetic markers spiking. Lena, the outpost xenobiologist, arrived hours later, looking like she hadn't slept in days, and when she saw the console, her face went pale. She pulled Theo aside, scanned his arm, and said the worst possible thing: "This isn't just about embarrassment or offense. Theo, you didn't just see her armorless, you triggered a binding instinct in her species, one that cannot be undone. You're not in trouble. You're in a contract, a biological one, and unless this is completed, she could die. And you might as well, because the system now sees you as one organism. Kirill stood silently by the door, not aggressive, not distant, just watching. And Kirill stood silently by the door, not aggressive, not distant, just watching, and this watching. Theo felt something in her gaze, not anger, not ownership, but something ancient, something like expectation. And when he asked what exactly being chosen meant, Kirill answered with only one phrase: you looked, and now I cannot look away. And in that moment, the station no longer felt like a workplace. It felt like the beginning of something dangerous and permanent. The following day, the station remained in soft lockdown. Though no alarms blared and no warnings were given, the air carried a strange pressure, as if the outpost itself was waiting for something to unfold. Theo sat inside the sealed med chamber, now outfitted with biometric walls and 2 sentry drones that stood idle yet alert. Kirill hadn't spoken since declaring him chosen. Her presence calm yet unshakable. She remained near him, always standing, never resting, eyes following his every movement as if watching for signs of weakness or change. Lena paced in the observation room, her face buried in data logs and old Rin scrolls, trying to decode what exactly had been triggered by Theo's accidental glance. She finally looked up, her voice strained with realization, and said, "This is not just a biological reaction. It's a sacred protocol their species considers unshielded. Eye contact during undressing, a ritual trigger. It activates the ancient pairing rite once believed lost in time, and it only works if the observer is genetically compatible." Theo stared blankly, unable to accept what he was hearing, but Kirill stepped forward and confirmed it with a quiet nod. She spoke slowly in Galactic common, her accent sharp, yet oddly melodic. "I was trained for war, not for bond, but my blood knows what my mind denies. You looked with unguarded sight, and now my heart does not belong to me anymore." Theo felt his throat tighten. He wanted to say it was a mistake, that he didn't mean it, that he didn't know, but something in him stopped. Not guilt, not fear, but a weight like gravity pulling him toward something he couldn't see. Kirill stepped closer, holding a small metallic disc, which she placed on the floor between them, and the device hummed, releasing a low pulse of light that formed a glowing spiral between them. The AI activated again, now speaking with a softer tone. Imprint resonance detected, syncing, beginning authorization pending from bonded parties. Theo glanced at Lena, who whispered, "If you walk away now, the process will collapse. She will survive, but barely, and the system will purge all memory of this event, including you. But if you accept, it will bind you both at a level beyond law, beyond species. You will share instinct, thought, memory, even emotion for as long as the bond holds." Kirill knelt on one knee, placing her hand over her heart, and lowered her head. She was not demanding, she was offering something ancient, something sacred. Theo felt the pulse from the device reach into his skin, brushing his nerves like a whisper, and he closed his eyes for 1 second, just to breathe. But when he opened them again, he saw flashes of another world, golden skies and violet sands, giant towers of bone and light, warriors dancing with blades that sang names into the air, and one girl alone staring into the stars, asking, "When will the other half come home?" Theo staggered back, his breath sharp, and Kirill rose slowly, her eyes wide, not in confusion, but in recognition. "You saw it," she said, not as a question, but a truth. And that meant the bond had already started, with or without consent. Lena muttered under her breath, "This shouldn't be possible. This was never recorded." Before the AI echoed her shock, bond initializing at 12%. Sync achieved, memory echo shared. Theo reached for the wall to steady himself as Kirill placed her hand gently over his skin warm against hers, and for the first time since the Door opened. He realized this wasn't just about her, or about what he had seen. This was about something older buried in blood. And silence, something that had waited for both of them to collide, and now that it had, there was no turning back. The outpost corridors grew quieter over the next 2 cycles as word of the incident spread. Without being spoken, no announcements were made yet. Every crew member began giving Theo space, their eyes full of silent questions, their steps hurried whenever Kirill passed. She remained beside him, never aggressive, never intrusive, but always present like a shadow made of will. Theo tried to return to his maintenance duties, but the AI denied access. Every door, every tool, every panel now responded only when Kirill was near, as if the system itself had shifted loyalty. The bond percentage climbed slowly, displayed on every terminal he passed, climbing from 12 to 20, then 35. Without any input, and still he hadn't agreed to anything. Lena requested a formal meeting in the neutral med chamber, and Kirill allowed it, her expression unreadable, as Theo sat down across from her and listened to the truth of what was coming. The bond they had triggered was entering the recognition phase, an irreversible process in Rin biology where once it reached 50%, the only way to survive was to complete the rite of joining, a sacred practice that merged not just memory but instinct, forming a connection that no outsider could sever. And if the rite was denied, Kirill's neural pathways would begin to fail, her body rejecting itself in response to the unfulfilled bond. Theo asked why it couldn't just stop, why the system kept pushing it forward, and Lena revealed that their station AI wasn't just monitoring, it was facilitating it. Ever since Theo's exposure, the AI pulled old protocols from Forbiddens. Rin archives protocols never meant to be active on a human base, protocols that treated him as a legitimate mate candidate because of dormant genetic threads previously undetected. Kirill stood then, placing a single silver band on the floor between them, and said with calm conviction, "I will not force what should be chosen, but know this: if you reject the right, I will return to my world and be unmade in silence, for the bond cannot be transferred nor broken, only fulfilled or fated." Theo felt his chest tighten, the weight of choice pressing harder than fear, because he had seen her strength, seen her fight, and now seeing her willing to die quietly, without anger, struck deeper than any threat he had faced before. The band on the floor shimmered, pulsing with soft blue light, and Lena explained it was not jewelry, but the first key to the rite. When worn, it marked both as equal partners, not predator and prey, not victim and hunter, but willing halves of something born long before either of them. Theo hesitated, reaching out not for the band, but for Kirill's hand, and when their skin met, a rush of heat passed through his spine, and his mind filled with sounds, not his own laughter, wind, battle drums, and a name he had never spoken. Qatari. The word echoed in his skull, and Kirill gasped as her grip tightened, her knees buckling, as if something ancient had just clicked into place. Lena stepped back, whispering, "It's happening." The bond just jumped to 70%. The spiral script crawled up Theo's wrist, glowing faintly as the eye confirmed imprint, stabilized recognition. Entering fusion stage, Kirill opened her eyes wide, shimmering with tears that refused to fall, and said softly, "You carry the name of one who once gave his life to protect mine. Across time, across war, across death, and now I understand why I could not stop the bond. You are not just chosen, you are remembered." And in that moment, Theo stopped resisting, not because he was ready, but because something in him had always known this path waited, and now that it had found him, he could not let her fall alone. The spiral mark on Theo's wrist continued to glow even after he left the med chamber, the light fading only when Kirill was nearby and pulsing brighter the farther they were apart. Lena scanned it again in private, her equipment struggling to read the frequency, and when the results came through her breath, caught in her throat, the genetic data had changed slightly, not mutated, but activated a dormant string buried in. Theo's code now lit like a beacon, the signature not fully human, but a hybrid lineage older than any Earth records had stored. She cross-referenced the spiral with the oldest Rin texts and found a near match in their myth archives, referencing the blood of Qatari, a warrior caste from a now extinct planetary alliance that once fought beside the Rin during the War of 10 Suns. Theo stared at the screen in disbelief. The old drawing showed warriors like shadows with bright eyes, wielding memory blades and standing beside Rin partners not behind them, but as equals. Qatari were said to form soul bonds through vision alone, a gift of clarity shared only with those who were seen without fear. Lena turned to Theo, her voice low and steady, and said, "You're not just compatible by accident, your DNA carries the memory of one who stood beside them long ago, and the bond with Karel didn't start 2 days ago. It may have started lifetimes ago." Theo felt his hands tremble, his thoughts spiraling not from panic, but from the strange sense that something inside him was no longer lost, just waiting. Karel entered quietly, having sensed the spike in Theo's heart rate without being told. She looked at the screen, then at him, her eyes softer than ever, and said, "I knew when I first saw your gaze that you had seen me before, not in this life, but another." She took a deep breath and reached toward the spiral on his wrist. The moment her fingers touched it, light sparked upward, forming a brief image of 2 figures locked in battle, standing back to back, blades drawn, eyes locked in silent trust. And Theo blinked as the image vanished, but the echo of it stayed. He could feel the weight of that other life, the memory not his, and yet fully real. The AI system chimed with a new alert stating memory convergence, 81% sync, accelerating, initiating ancestral imprint, merged. Theo looked to Lena, whose face had gone pale as she read the message, and she said, "If it reaches 100 without full bonding, your mind may not hold it. The memories are ancient. They weren't meant to sit in a single mind without anchor." Karel nodded and replied that the rite must be completed soon, or the weight of the past would crush the present. Theo asked what the rite truly meant, not in ceremony but in truth, and Karel told him that the rite was not about obedience or claim, but about trust. It was a surrender, not of power but of truth, where both partners share everything, no walls, no secrets, no separation, and that once done, the bond could never be faked or reversed. Theo stood still, absorbing the meaning as visions danced behind his eyes. Unfamiliar faces, familiar names, fires in foreign skies, and a voice whispering again and again, "Qatari, my other half, you have returned." Lena gave them both space, and the door sealed behind her as Karel stepped forward, placing her hand gently over Theo's chest and said, "Not as a warrior, but as something older. If you are not ready, I will go and let the stars take what is mine. But if you are Qatari, then I ask you not as bond, but as heart. See me now with the same eyes that saw me before, and this time do not look away." And Theo met her gaze without fear, without hesitation, because the truth was no longer just in his blood. It was in his bones, in his breath, and he had already chosen before he ever knew the choice was real. The quiet that had settled over Outpost Raka 7 shattered when an unauthorized ship entered the outer perimeter, its design unmistakably of Rin origin, but bearing the jagged red markings of the Valak clan, a rival warrior sect long believed extinct. The ship didn't request permission, it demanded it, broadcasting a single message across all channels: "Bring forth the one who carries the spiral, or face ritual challenge." The outpost commander froze, unsure. What protocol applied when alien mating rites turned into interclan disputes, and Lena rushed to intercept the signal before it reached Theo Carril, however, was already armed not in fury, but in silence, her stance calm, her blades sheathed, but her presence unmistakably ready for war. Theo met her in the central hangar as the Valak vessel docked, hissing steam and releasing a tall figure covered in obsidian armor with glowing red eyes and a voice like gravel wrapped in silk. The warrior stepped forward, looked at Carril, then at Theo, and said, "You stole what was not yours. The right was not yours to claim." Carril stepped forward, her voice like thunder without, shouting he did not take anything the bond chose on its own, and the right began the moment I fell the Valak. Warrior laughed a deep bitter sound and said, "You always were too soft, Carril, and now you hand your bloodline to a half-burn without blade or legacy." Theo's fists clenched not out of insult, but instinct, and the spiral on his wrist pulsed brighter. Visible even through his sleeve, the Valak warrior's eyes narrowed. The challenge is ancient, the law older than both clans. If another blood lays claim, then trial must decide. Theo looked to Lena, who whispered in a tight voice, "The trial of the bond is not about fighting, it is about memory, about connection. They will test whether the bond is real or forced. If you fail, they will take you, and Carril will be exiled or executed, depending on how much mercy they feel that day." Carril turned to Theo, eyes unreadable, and said, "I will not force you through this, but if we do not stand together, they will erase what has begun." Theo stepped forward, placing his palm over hers, the spiral marking flashing between them, and he said, "If this is my past coming for me, then I will face it not alone, not anymore." The Valak warrior bowed mockingly and signaled for the trial chamber to be opened. Deep within the outpost, a room long sealed awakened, its walls humming with old Rintech, never meant to run on human systems. The eye of the station stuttered at first, then merged with the ancient protocol and activated the Chamber of Bonds, a vast circular space filled with memory fields and psychic conduits. Lena escorted Theo and Carril inside and explained that each participant would be shown visions of the other's truth, and only if the bond was real would those visions sync without collapse. Theo stood in the center, Carril across from him, and the light shifted around them, pulling them into shared memory. Theo gasped as he fell into Carril's mind, seeing her childhood, her first battle, the day she chose exile rather than kill a helpless prisoner, and the night she saw his eyes and felt the call of the spiral for the first time. Carril stood frozen as she saw through Theo's heart, the loneliness, the dreams of worlds he never understood, the whispers of languages he'd never learned but always felt, and the buried ache for something more than duty, something real, something remembered. The memory fields began to pulse in harmony, the room shaking as both sets of memories collided and blended, and the Valak warrior outside the chamber stared in disbelief as the final confirmation lit the walls. Bond verified. Ancestral sync achieved. Lineage match complete. Theo opened his eyes, not as a human who had looked by accident, but as a soul who had finally returned to where he was always meant to be. As the chamber walls pulsed with memory, light, and psychic resonance, Theo and Carril stood surrounded by the remnants of lifetimes, their minds drawn into the shared stream of thought where time unraveled and reformed into living memory. The floor beneath them shifted with every breath, echoing scenes neither of them had spoken aloud, but both had carried in silence. Theo felt his knees weaken as visions flooded him again, not just of Carrili's battles or her moments of honor, but of her fears, her exile, her silent grief when her sister fell during a failed mission, and the guilt that drove her to choose solitude above status, her hands covered in blood she couldn't wash away, and a voice whispering over and over in her dreams, "You are still whole, even when broken." Carril watched as Theo's childhood unfolded before her eyes, quiet and unnoticed on an Earth colony where he fixed machines older than his teachers, spoke to stars that never answered, and felt drawn to languages and symbols no one else saw. She saw the moment he touched a damaged Rin artifact in a scrapyard and felt a jolt of belonging the way. He hid it in his drawer, unable to explain the ache it stirred in his chest. Both stood still as the chamber brought them to a vision neither expected: an old battlefield scorched with flame where a Kotari warrior died protecting a Rin commander, and as the smoke cleared, the warrior's dying words were spoken in ancient Rin, not as a farewell, but as a promise. "I will find you when the stars turn again." The image faded, and the spiral on Theo's wrist flared with brilliant blue light, wrapping around his forearm and extending across his chest, glowing in perfect sync with the markings on Kirill's skin. The chamber responded, the air growing warmer, the walls vibrating in rhythm, and the AI now merged with the Rin trial system announced sync at 97% final phase beginning. Theo reached out, instinct guiding him, not logic, and took Kirill's hand, their palms connecting with a jolt of shared understanding, and the chamber responded immediately, locking them in a field of light where nothing else could be seen, only the echo of their joined breath. The AI voice returned, softer, now older, as if speaking from a time before machines, and said, "The right is now at threshold. Both must speak truth with no shield, no filter, no fear. And if the bond is whole, the seal will form. If not, the seal will break." Kirill looked into Theo's eyes, her voice steady yet trembling, and said, "I feared this bond not because I doubted you, but because I doubted myself. I carry honor and shame in equal weight, and I thought my past would poison what we could be, but now I see it does not shatter me, it completes me. And I ask not as warrior, but as Kirill, will you stand beside me, not in duty, but in choice?" Theo closed his eyes and spoke with clarity that did not feel rehearsed or forced. "I never sought this, I never expected it, but now that I know what lives inside me, I choose you, not because of fate or blood or memory, but because when I saw you, I saw home." The light surged around them, sealing their words in energy, and the spiral symbols wrapped together between them, forming a new sigil not known in any Rin archive, one that pulsed with both color and memory. Kirill gasped, not in fear but in awe, and the AI declared, "Bond verified, final phase complete." Ancestral fusion stabilized. The chamber faded back to silence, and they stood alone, now no longer candidates or strangers, but bonded equals, chosen by memory, sealed by will. And as they stepped from the circle, the Velic warrior stood silent, no longer mocking, only nodding in recognition, for no one could challenge what had been truly earned. As the light dimmed and the chamber seals lifted, Theo and Kirill stepped forward together, their steps no longer uncertain, no longer separate. The spiral markings on their skin glowed faintly, but no longer burned. Instead they pulsed gently, like a heartbeat shared between them. The Velic warrior, who had once challenged the bond, stood motionless, his red eyes fixed on the new sigil formed during the trial, a symbol no archive could decode, and yet one that resonated deeply across all Rin bloodlines. He bowed his head slightly, not in surrender, but in recognition, before turning silently and returning to his ship without another word. The docking bay hissed closed behind him, and the outpost's I deactivated lockdown protocols slowly. Systems across Raqqa 7 returned to normal, but the crew walked with different steps, now eyes filled with something new, not fear, but wonder, not hesitation, but reverence. Lena stood waiting at the observation deck, her face pale with exhaustion and awe. As she reviewed the final data stream from the trial chamber, she approached Theo with a small scanner and said quietly, "Your neural pathways have stabilized. Your sync with the source imprint is clean. Kirill's life readings are stronger than they've ever been." The bond didn't just work, it evolved. Theo looked out into the stars, his mind still buzzing with memory, echoes, not voices or images anymore, but instincts, reflexes, sensations, like the knowledge of another life tucked quietly into his bones. Kirill stood beside him, her expression calm, her presence steady, no longer guarding, no longer bound by instinct, but by choice. She reached out, not to claim him, but to offer her hand open, and waiting, Theo took it without hesitation, and in that simple touch the spiral between them shimmered again, only for a moment, but enough to let the eye whisper confirmation, sync, resonance, preserved voluntary stabilization, verified bond classification, upgraded. Lena smiled weakly and said, "This will change more than just protocol. Every database connected to RIN relations just received a new entry, a living bond not triggered by accident or instinct, but by mutual memory and earned trust." Kirill turned to Theo and said softly, "I am no longer bound to protect you by code or tradition, yet I still will not leave your side unless you ask me to, because what we have now is not command, it is conviction." Theo felt his chest tighten, not from fear, but from clarity. For the first time he understood that the bond was not a chain. It was a bridge, one that connected not just two lives, but two paths once lost in time. Theo asked, "What comes next?" And Kirill smiled with a fire he hadn't seen before, and said, "We teach others what it means to choose. We show them that memory is not destiny unless you allow it to be." As they walked through the halls of Raka 7, crew members stepped aside, not in fear, but in silent respect, some bowing slightly, others offering quiet nods, and one child of mixed lineage saluted them both as they passed and whispered, "I saw your trial, it was beautiful." Theo looked back at the child and nodded, not as a technician, not as an outsider, but as someone who now carried something older and brighter than any rank or title. He and Kirill returned to the observation dome, the stars wide and endless before them, and for a moment no words were spoken, only the soft hum of the station and the pulse of the spiral warming gently across their skin. And Theo knew that while the path ahead would not be simple, it would never be lonely again, because he had not just seen her, he had chosen her, and in doing so had finally seen himself. If you love thrilling HFY Sci-Fi stories like this, turn on the bell icon so you never miss the next twist in our sci-fi universe. Make sure to hit that subscribe button.